Welcome to 2K Sports Studios. I'm Greg Gumbel with Clark Kellogg. We're here with the 2K Sports Season Preview Show. Here are the top 5 teams in the nation as we head into the season. The Duke Blue Devils come in as the #1 ranked team, followed by USC, Louisville, Tennessee, and Connecticut. Clark, what's your take of the teams that make up the top 5?
Sometimes the top players in the nation and the best teams in the nation aren't necessarily together at the top of the poll. But going into this season, we have some of the absolute best players playing on the marquee teams. That's really exciting to me, Greg.
The Duke Blue Devils are projected as the favorites here in the early going. These are the defending national champions, and they're getting a lot of respect going into this season.
Usually, last year's champs get the benefit of the doubt in the first poll of the next season. So we'll find out soon enough if their position in the top 5 is based on reputation or is warranted.
USC is in the #2 spot. Certainly, they'll get a big boost from the return of their leading scorer from a year ago.
That's a big advantage for them. They don't have to spend the first few weeks of the season searching for that go-to guy. They know who he is, and they'll use him.
Louisville comes in as #3. They're a tough team, but they're going to have a very hard time surviving that vicious conference they're in.
It's virtually impossible to go through a conference schedule unscathed. They'll probably take their lumps, but it might pay off come tournament time, as tough conferences tend to produce tough teams.
Tennessee starts the year as the 4th-ranked team. They bring back 4 starters, and that should pay huge dividends for them this year.
I can't tell you what an advantage that is for them. There's so much turnover in the college game these days that having 4 starters coming back is almost unfair, Greg.
Connecticut is the #5 team. They lost a big piece of their team with the departure of last season's leading rebounder.
It's going to have to be a group effort on the boards for a little while until some of the younger big men get the confidence to hold their own game in and game out.
Here's the next group of teams in our preseason top 25. What do you think of this group, Clark?
With such a long season ahead of us, it's almost impossible to put a finger on just who the contenders and pretenders are from this set of teams. But that doesn't mean we won't try.
The Memphis Tigers, the #15 team, have stirred up a lot of talk in the offseason. They're going to have to find someone to fill the void left by their departed leading scorer, Clark.
The important thing for them is not to thrust someone into that role just for the sake of it. It will be a much smoother transition if the players are allowed to ease into their new spots.
The Cincinnati Bearcats, the #11 team, have also generated a lot of interest. They had a pretty solid record last year, finishing with 20 wins.
That 20-win plateau is one of those benchmarks in college hoops that immediately classifies you as an elite team. So they're going to have a tough act to follow. But if they simply play to their potential, they can reach that mark again.
Okay, Clark, let's take a look at the teams that close out the preseason top 25 poll. What do you think of this collection?
I'm not convinced that all of these teams belong in the top 25. I don't want to pick out anyone in particular, but I think some teams that aren't on the list could make a pretty strong case as to why they belong here.
The Arizona State Sun Devils, the #21 team, probably deserve a closer look. They had a nice finish to the year, but it ended with a disappointing loss in the regional final.
They were so close to the Final Four they could taste it. And the memory of that Elite 8 loss should be all the motivation they need this year to work just that little bit harder. We'll see if they can get over the hump this time.
The Iowa State Cyclones, the #24 team, are also worth keeping an eye on. One bit of good news for them, they have last season's leading rebounder coming back for another year.
With that low post presence already established, they'll have a little bit of swagger heading into the season. I look for them to be sharp right from the start.
As usual, we have a lot of new coaching hires to tell you about as we start the season. Here are the coaches who made a change this offseason. Some very interesting moves on the list, to say the least. The South Carolina coach is one of the hires that drew a lot of media attention. The South Carolina Gamecocks have a lot of fans that are delighted to have a coach of his ability, Clark.
He's yet to find his way to that final weekend, but he still has an impressive resume. His new school is certainly hoping he can add a Final Four run to his list of accomplishments.
The St. John's coach also made a move to a new school, and that's generated some excitement on that campus. The Red Storm of St. John's are a team looking to rebuild under their new leader.
This is a big break for him. He's paid his dues with a lot of stops along the coaching highway, and now it's time for a new beginning. We wish him all the success in the world, Greg. He definitely deserves a fair shot.
We now head to the part of the show where we break down the top players in the nation and show you our preseason All-American list. What you see before you is the cream of the crop in college hoops. What a list. The Memphis Tigers are pinning their hopes squarely on this young man's shoulders, Clark.
Blue is the first player on the list for good reason.
He should have no problems leading his team in rebounding again this season. He's a broad-shouldered kid who can take up space and inhale anything that comes off that rim.
As for our next first-teamer, Connecticut is more than willing to go into battle with him, Clark.
Sessoms is simply a spectacular player. Feels like this guy's been playing college basketball forever. This will be his 4th year as a starter. But I still don't take him for granted, and I think this will be his best season of all of them.
Next up is a player that's drawing comparisons to some of the all-time college greats. The Tennessee Volunteers are fortunate to have him in their corner.
Sochu is one of my favorite players in the country. He finished last season as a second-team All-American, but I think he deserves a spot on the first team to start this year. If he was one of the 10 best players then, he's definitely one of the 5 best players now.
Let's move on to a player who's worked very hard to earn his spot on the list. The Duke Blue Devils can depend on a solid effort from him each and every night.
Gorel is going to play a huge role in his team's success.
Players will learn to shy away from going up against him one-on-one. He has excellent timing, which allowed him to block a bunch of shots last year.
He averaged more than 2 a game. Just from an intimidation standpoint, he is a game changer. I think he'll force opposing offenses to completely overhaul their game plans.
And finally, we have another superb player to round out the first team. The UCLA Bruins will probably get used to seeing him make the impossible look ordinary.
Durovich is going to have his own personal highlight reel by the end of this season. He's back for another go after leading his team in scoring a year ago. If he improves his offense even a little bit, he'll be one of the deadliest scorers in the country.
As we move to the second team All-Americans, we can see there's no shortage of talent with this group. They're all elite players with the potential to dominate the game. The Maryland Terrapins have built their team around this young man's talent, and I'd say that's a pretty good idea.
Kreitz was close to a spot on the first team, but there was too much competition this season. There's plenty to like about him as a player. He's got that deadly combination of smarts and physical skills that makes him so difficult to defend. A coach's mentality in the body of a world-class athlete. Any questions as to why he's on the list?
The next player on the team is a sensational player in his own right. Duke is in for a treat if he can pull it all together and have a great year.
Tran is in the spotlight for all the right reasons. If I had to pick some frontrunners for the Player of the Year award, he would be right there on the list. I've seen him take over games even when he isn't scoring 30. There are some great scorers among these All-Americans, and he's one of them, but he does much more than score.
We can expect to see some amazing performances out of him all year long. The Duke Blue Devils are looking for a lot of production from him, and they probably won't be disappointed.
Guasco is an extremely powerful weapon for his team. He can make things happen on the basketball court thanks to his unique ability to read and understand defenses, while most players are just trying to come up with their next move. He's 3 steps ahead of the game, and that's what separates the good players from the great.
Our next All-American may have designs on the first team by the end of the season. USC has one of the most reliable go-to guys in the country in him.
Doobie is one of the great talents in the college game today.
He was a tremendous rebounder last season.
He came away with an average of 5 rebounds a game. I expect him to hit the glass with even more passion this year. He is a rugged competitor.
Here is the final player to cap off our list of All-Americans. The Connecticut Huskies know who their fan favorite is going to be this year.
Vianney is ready to have a breakout season. He's a 7'3" senior center. This is a big man who produces big time, and he does it on a consistent basis. Unless an opposing team can counter with a big bruiser of their own to keep a body on him, he's going to run amok.
All right, Clark, thanks very much. Glad you could join us for the 2K Sports Season Preview. We hope you enjoy all the college hoops action ahead. So long, everyone.